Hi guys, it's Blackie for Shaman's Forge. Well, everybody that I know of that's into the woodcraft, bushcraft, outdoorsy type deal, and it's not limited to that, all of them have this addiction. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way, but all of them do with something. For me, it's rucksacks, sleeping bags, and by far the worst, pocket knives. That was a very momentous moment for me when I was a small boy, when my grandfather gave me a pocket knife and trusted me with a pocket knife. And it was sort of a rite of passage in my time that when your parents trusted you with a pocket knife, when your parents trusted you to build a fire or light the grill on your own, when your parents trusted you to be alone, when your parents trusted you to take the family car, when your parents trusted you to be gone overnight or go hunting by yourself. Those were milestones in a young man's life. So for me, near and dear to my heart has always been the pocket knife. It's a symbol of independence to me. Now, I'll give you a close-up here in a minute. We're going to look at my bag of pocket knives and talk for just a second about, one of my little addictions. But my everyday EDC is this Victorinox, I believe it's the Huntsman model. And it was a limited run one year that had the blue scales on it, but I'll show that up close. But I almost every other day also throw another knife in my pocket. And I have got oodles and oodles of pocket knives. To the point that you feel kind of guilty when you don't carry one for a while. I know that sounds stupid, but each one has a memory, or each one is a gift from a friend or something that you got somewhere or whatever, and each one you think is special in some way. But you can only carry one at a time, or maybe two, and that's it. You can't carry 30 or 40 of them at a time. But it seems like every time I turn around, there's another knife. And it's at a price that I want. And it's a style I don't quite have. And I've wanted to try that style. And I've wanted to do this. Or I had one of them back in the day. You get my point. You just bit by bit keep coming up with excuses to get another pocket knife. Now this is the bulk of my collection that I have right now. And I'm not a true knife collector. I'm not someone who wants this, line of all the case knives or line of all this. I just like a given knife and I see the uses of it. And that's why I get it. That's why I prefer it. So let me zoom the camera in and we'll take a quick look at my little addiction. Stay with me. Okay, and if there's some wind noise, I apologize. I'm out here at the lake today, but I kind of like the breeze. It's in the 90s. So this is an overview of my pocket knife collection. Now there is some rhyme and reason when you start looking at it. First it looks just pure random, but it's actually not when you start organizing it by what it is. Each group has sort of a function. Give me a minute and I'll show you that. Because each one of them has sort of a specific place, a specific use, or was just, something I thought was cool at the time. Now, almost got her. Okay. Now, first off, let's start with my everyday carry. This is a Victorinox Huntsman, like I said. And it has all the functions I need for a daily carry. It has the screwdriver, it has the bottle opener, it has the can opener, because I forgot to bring a can opener at lunch. I have scissors in it. I have a wood saw in it. I have the main blade, I have a small blade, I have a Phillips head screwdriver, a package hook, which is great for hooking and pulling lines tight with, and an awl that has a sewing hole in it. We talked about that before. Toothpick, pin, and tweezers. All of that in my everyday carry. Now, this is used more than anything like a tool kit. For the most part, I hardly use the knife blades because I'm normally carrying another type of blade. But for me, this is the, knife zero. I'm going to have this no matter what on me. And it's going to have the all the tool kit available. The scissors are used probably the most everything on here. Now, for the other blade. And one of these others will usually be riding in my pocket as the other blade of the day. Now, what these three are, these are trapper knives. This is the one by Rough Rider. It's got the big skinning spay blade, and then it's got the clip point blade. This is an old saber knife. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand is the concept of, and I'll get to this in a minute, of the cheap knife and what it was used for. Because there was really, really good knives like your cases that you carried in your pocket, and then there was the other knife, and I'll get to that. Now, what's not displayed on here, because I keep them at the house locked up, I have my father's case trapper, my grandfather's case trapper knife, and my case trapper knife. All three of them the same model, look alike. I don't take them out. That's a nostalgia thing. That's a keepsake heirloom. They don't go in the field with me anymore. But I have the trapper knives, 2-blade trappers. I also have up here the scout knives, which is the classic Boy Scout knife. Now, you've seen me use this in a couple other videos, but it's the classic Boy Scout. This is an Ulster. The U.S. Army, which is basically a scout knife. The Rough Rider, basically scout knife. They call it the camp knife. And one I just picked up, a saber camp knife. We'll get back to this in a minute. Over here's all the Barlows. I have 3 Barlows right here. And the Barlows, and an old timer trapper as well. A Barlow just like this was my very, very first pocket knife. It looked a great deal like this with this sharp clip point on it. When my grandfather gave it to me, he snapped this point off in a vise. I was young and he didn't want me to stab myself. I could cut myself but not stab myself. Cuts you can sew up, stabs can be dangerous, so to speak, from his mindset. So it's very similar to my very first pocket knife that I carried. And I love the design. And the Barlow goes all the way back to the 1600s in some degree. It was the jackknife, the pocket knife. I have here a saber pocket knife. Again, we'll go back to that in a minute, in the cheap pocket knife. And then I have a 3-blade Barlow style, which has the round blade, the skinning type fillet blade, and then the small pin blade. This is actually one of my favorite whittling knives, that when I'm whittling a small project, this, the Boy Scout knife, and 1 or 2 others almost always get picked to do the job. Down here I have my Stockman, and this is an old saber Stockman knife. Just the 3-blade with the 3 separate ones. This is a buck canoe knife that was given to me for Christmas a year ago by a dear friend of mine. I like it a lot. I carry one of my favorites, is my Granddaddy Barlow. This one is a Rough Rider. My grandfather carried a Granddaddy Barlow almost everywhere with him. It was his favorite working knife, using knife. Yes, he had that case pocket knife, but one like this did 90% of the work. That case only came out in certain instances. The rest of the time, this was the working, this was the mule that did the work. So I got one of these in memory of him. And like I pointed out, it's the same size. Hold on a minute, let me show you that. In an earlier video, I pointed out that my folding Barlow was the size of a Mora knife. There they are side and side. The Mora has maybe a 1/2 inch more blade, but as far as size, the two knives are almost the same. There's the blade side and side. So this is a great craft knife. This is a good folding craft knife. A lot of people I've turned this on to started carrying one of these, and their haversack is like a folding Mora. Use it like a Mora. Now, I have a couple of oddballs in here as well. This is an old military surplus Italian Navy knife, which is based upon the British jackknife. And I use it for certain projects because of that blade on it. It takes a good edge, but man, it's got a spring that it's almost dangerous trying to open and close this thing. But it will not close on your hand, I'll give them that. They are dead serious that that ain't gonna close on your hand. And it's got a can opener on the other side and a screwdriver up here on top. And then here is the cotton sampler knife. I got this to try it out because this blade design looks a lot like a butcher knife to me. And I've been experimenting with this as like a folding pocket butcher knife, being able to skin and process game. And it has done a very good job thus far of cleaning fish, cleaning small game, etc. It takes a decent edge, and these are not expensive. But think of it like a folding butcher knife for field use. Now, let's get back to that idea of the cheap knife. Okay, the cheap knife. Now, after World War II, because of World War II, many of the European, Japan, and a lot of other nations' economies were just totally trashed. And so, in an effort to get them back up, many companies were encouraged to go over there and to help these countries get started in production again. Taking a pattern of coffee pot, teacup, pocket knife, whatever, and finding shops and small businesses over that could produce these cheaply. It would help their economy, and it would be a boon to the American investor because he could get fairly skilled, cheap labor and produce a product at a cheap price that he could make a good profit on. Now, when I was a kid, you would go into the barber shop, you'd go into the feed store, you'd go into the gas station, whatever, and quite often hanging up here on the wall somewhere was a piece of cardboard, some colorful lettering and stuff on it, and hanging on it was a pocket knife. And when I'm talking about pocket knife, I mean one like this, something similar to this. Now this is a Barlow that's made by Sabre, like I said. You know, a carbon steel blade that's actually got a decent temper to it, a little pen blade. And these were Duralin or plastic with a actual nickel silver stamp cap over the top, and it's just pinned in place. It's not a high quality piece of gear, but it's not junk, but it's not high quality. Now this is an old Sabre Boy Scout type camp knife that I just got. And it has a carbon steel blade, and it does hold a decent edge. You know, the can opener, little old pubby bottle opener, and a little bitty awl. And of course the bail hook. What these were was, like I said, remember my grandfather had a case pocket knife, my father had a case, I ended up with a case. These were the tool knives. These were the knives that could be sacrificed. You were not going to take your bone handle case out unless you had no other choice and scrape the battery terminals when you were stuck on the side of the road, unless you had no other choice. You were not going to take it to cut that wire that had got bound up in your piece of equipment. You were not going to take it and try to cut that heavily reinforced belt off of your pickup truck when it had got all broken and tangled into things. That's what these knives were for. They were cheap. Every tackle box had at least 1 or 2 of these knives. Every toolbox had 1 or 2 of these knives. The glove box had them. This was the knife you picked up when I need a sharp piece of metal that I don't care a lot about. That's what these were for, because they were so cheap. I can remember being a little boy and these knives were like $3.50 a piece, hanging up on them cards. You'd go in the drugstore, there they were. You know, I can remember going into a 5 and dime general store on downtown Main Street, and at the end of the toy aisle with pocket knives. These were considered a kid's pocket knife, a starting pocket knife. You get my drift. It was actually, relatively to today's standards, a decent piece of steel. It's a piece of high carbon steel with a good Rockwell on it. Holds an edge fairly well. But compared to a case, or a nice buck, or a old timer, or any of the other names, it was like an unnamed generic knife. And that's what these knives filled that niche. Now when I was a kid, I used a ton of these. This was the knife that you used when you had that dirty job that had to be done. And so most of us carried one of these on us or in our pocket or whatever as a junk throwaway knife. Now, today, with modern technology, it's amazing to me to go back and find these knives and see how good a quality they are. This was the junk knife 50 years ago, the junk knife. And yet it's a piece of high carbon steel, probably 01 tool steel, and it's probably around 57 Rockwell. You know, the handles aren't high quality, nothing else about them is quality. The blade is normally fairly decent. And me, as a nostalgia, I pick these up because I find uses for them. I find people that need a good little pocket knife. Now, as you saw in my collection, several of the sabers, I pointed out there were sabers. Saber, if you're interested in such thing, was actually a decent one. Saber of Japan. Right after the war, they'd come in and got them, and they were normally a 01 tool steel or something equivalent, and it was normally a good Rockwell, and the trappers and stuff like that did pretty good service. You can still find these for $8, $9, $10 a piece on eBay. So if you're like me and you've got a pocket knife addiction, you may want to pick a couple of them up. That Rough Rider knives are a modern equivalent. They make a decent knife at a low price. Yes, there's much higher quality. Again, the case and all like that are much higher quality. Hope this gives you some ideas, guys, for adding to your collection. Please leave any questions or comments below, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. I'm Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft. Wish you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.